We'll find out about some of the breakdowns. Josh Paunil for his weekly chat as we take a look. It's the final look at Eagles practice today, the most important day to get them ready to play on Sunday against the Patriots. Josh, welcome back. How are you, pal?
Thanks. Good. How you doing today, Mike?
Everything's good, man. And, today you have an interesting piece about this over at PhillyMag.com. Birds 24/7 is where you can read it, about the perception and reality. I think there's so many perceptions and reality on this particular team that are worth bringing up. But today, Chip, and this whole week, it seems like he has gone a long way to try to defend perception and reality. There are many different instances on this team where perception and reality may wag its ugly tail here, but where do you think it's most prevalent that this team has a perception problem?
Well, and that's been one of the biggest difficulties of evaluating Chip as a head coach. Is I think the toughest thing to gauge right now is particularly how much is Chip to blame in terms of his GM responsibilities and his coaching responsibilities, because one stat I used as an example was Eagles only have one wide receiver in the top 100 in the NFL in yards per route run. Now, is that because of Chip the GM, who just doesn't have good wide receivers, or is that because Chip the coach is setting his guys up for to be successful? So I think that's the biggest thing to gauge. The toughest thing to gauge is how much blame lies in each aspect of his responsibility. But that's one thing that Jeffrey Lloyd's going to have to untangle and determine to see if he's going to bring Chip Kelly back for next season.
The other perception and reality that he really tried to diffuse much of this week is him leaving. I thought it was interesting that it came up, he was asked about it, and then the next day there was reports that he kind of talked to the players. And, Josh, it seemed that the players were kind of, glad that he reached out to them to explain. Like, it was kind of, reassuring for them. And then you guys kind of tried to give him credit for doing that, and he didn't want to take the credit. He was like, that's not what I was doing. It's almost like he, no matter what, he wants to be, like, so distant from everything, even when you're trying to reward him for something that maybe he should have done anyway.
Yeah, that's one thing that's been, my perception, as we're talking about perception realities, is that Chip, whatever kind of the media presents to him, he wants to take kind of the opposite road. Now, whether that's good for him, bad for him, and like you were saying, that was one thing that it seemed to be beneficial for the team was, obviously it's not Chip's fault that there are, rumors about, he's going to go to USC or whatever other major college coaching jobs there is. I mean, it's always going to follow Chip around, or not always, but it's going to follow him around for a while given his success in college. But, the media at least viewed it as a good thing that he reassured his team, and the team seemed, at least from the players we spoke with, responded positively. Particularly the younger guys. The older guys weren't necessarily concerned with it, but the younger guys who, maybe haven't been in this position before where the head coach, may take another job, go back to college. They seem to be happy with it and to feel more, I guess, confident in, what was going to happen going forward. And so that was definitely a confusing part of Chip's press conference was, well, we heard you do this. Well, I wasn't really doing that. It was more doing, this. And it was something that was pretty confusing, and that is a reoccurring theme through Chip's press conferences.
Josh Paunil, PhillyMag.com, Birds 24/7. There'll be a new starter. He was asked today, is there going to be a lot of changes? He said, no, there's nobody to pick up off the street. There's no real starter changes from guys who were backups here. But one due to injury is Eric Rowe in and Nolan Carroll out. Rowe's getting picked on because Calvin Johnson torched him for a couple touchdowns, but I thought some of them were good throws and just, Calvin Johnson's pretty darn good. But how did he play in general in that game?
I think he definitely had an underrated game. Now, by no means am I saying he played, entirely well, but I definitely think there was, some good things that he did, because when you have a rookie going up against, arguably the best receiver in the last decade, and especially when he's not getting help every play, I mean, you can't expect him to shut Calvin Johnson down. That's just not realistic. And so there were small things. Sometimes his footwork wasn't great at the line of scrimmage, or he didn't get his hands on Calvin Johnson. But actually on two plays before Calvin Johnson's first touchdown, Eric Rowe did a good job in the red zone. He got a pass breakup on one of them. And so there was definitely a decent amount of good that went along with the bad for Eric Rowe. And he definitely showed some of that potential of why the Eagles took him in the second round. And although he gave up those 2 touchdowns against Calvin Johnson, he definitely gave coaches and his teammates as well a reason to be optimistic about his future.
You did a piece over at Philly Mag about the NFC East title being unlikely. Yes, they're just one game back, but Josh, how unlikely is it for this team to be able to win the NFC East, even just one game out?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the biggest statistic that I bring up is, yes, they're one game out of the division lead, but they're also one game out of having the worst record in the NFC. So it's not it's not that, yes, they're within striking distance of making the playoffs, but they're also within striking distance of a top 5 pick, maybe, even higher depending how things fall. So but it's not just being one game out. It's the way they've played in the last 3 games and the fact that they have the toughest stretch of their schedule coming up. They play at New England, they play the Cardinals, they play the Bills, and they're obviously not going to be favored or given a lot of chance to win any of those games. If they can't beat the Lions or the Buccaneers or the Dolphins, then there's no reason to think they'll win the next 3 games. Even if they win the last 2, the division games, they still wouldn't make the playoffs at just 6-10. So I think it's much more realistic that the Eagles get a top 5 pick than that they make the playoffs.
Yeah, and this is not an easy matchup for them this week. Sam Bradford back to play. How much does that help them? Does it in your opinion, does it do much for them? Does it stabilize anything, or is it just, hey, we got our starting quarterback back, let's hope it gives us a lift? Or is there something that's been missing with him out?
Yeah, I definitely think he gives them a small boost. But the problem is it's not going to be nearly big enough. I can buy the theory that, the Eagles come out strong and they score an early touchdown. But the problem is the Patriots are just going to come back and score a barrage of points. So I do think that he will give them a small boost, both because he'll play better than Mark Sanchez would, but also I think it just gives guys kind of a mental boost in terms of, okay, we got our guy back, let's try to turn things around. Obviously, Sam Bradford doesn't play defense. He had nothing to do with giving up 90 points in 5 days, or he couldn't have done anything to prevent that. But I do think every player on the team, both offense and defense, gets kind of a little bit of that edge back when you have your starting quarterback back in the lineup.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and we'll see. Josh, I've been kind of laughing half jokingly this week saying this NFL that we watch from week to week, a team gives up 90 in 2 games. It would almost not be stunning if they beat the best team in the league. That's almost the way this league seems to go nowadays.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing is, the NFL truly is unpredictable. There are examples every season, almost every week, and where teams that just seemingly don't really have a chance win. The Patriots obviously are a great example of that in their 18-1 season when they lost to the Giants. If they would have won that game, a lot of people would have called them, probably the best team of all time, but they didn't even beat the Giants, who are a lower seed in the NFC. So as down as people are about the Eagles, and rightfully so, there really is a possibility that they win just because of the nature of the NFL. And the one hope that I will give the Eagles is that when they were generating a lot of turnovers. And despite the talent and coaching disparity between the 2 teams, turnovers are the biggest neutralizer in the NFL. So it's obviously going to be a tall task against Tom Brady and this Patriots offense. But if the Eagles can get a few turnovers, they obviously would put them in a pretty good situation to pull off the upset.
We'll all see it unfold on Sunday at 4:25. It's the Eagles and the Patriots right here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Paunil has more on the Eagles at PhillyMag.com. Birds 24/7, all Eagles, all the time. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for having me, Mike.